So, the GameSpot today is going to be very special. We have guests from Turkey going to be talking about their study of game design and what they study. And they're probably going to show off a few of their projects that they're working on. And the first two presentations are going to be Pavol Buday. He's going to tell them about, or tell everybody, all of us, about the Slovak game dev scene, the way it started and where it is right now. After that, we're going to have Zdeněk Zahora, who I cannot see if he's here.
He's there.
Oh, he's back there. He's going to be talking about the Game Studies Initiative, which is happening here and in the Czech Republic. And then we're going to have the two awesome presentations from both the students and the teaching team, I guess. So, welcome, enjoy, and have fun. Pavol, your turn. Go.
Hey! This is a little weird because I'll be talking to you and like the screens are over there, so just like focus on the screens, not on me. Thanks again for having me here, and once again welcome. This is the first time I'm giving lecture in English, so bear with me on this one. I know that you love spreadsheets like statistics and hard data, like the numbers. So I won't bother you with this kind of data. I will show you pictures. There won't be any pictures of cats involved. So, and I'll tell you some funny stories. So, like Slovak game dev scene is like a pretty wide topic. So I decided to take you down the memory lane and show you where the roots of the games industry here in Slovak Republic lies and from where we are coming from. So, are you ready to jump through the time? Yeah! Alright, so, yes, this is mental note to me. So once again, my name is Pavol Buday and I'm helping indie developers and game studios with PR and marketing activities. My background is in writing. I was a journalist for 11 years and I was editor-in-chief for the leading website here in Slovakia called sector.sk. So basically I was playing video games all day that I got for free and I was paid to do it. And I was the first one in Slovakia that was paid full-time to do it. So I'm pretty lucky, I guess. So let's jump on. Since we have guests from Switzerland, you need to know something about Slovakia. Not all of you, but the guests need to know. We were once country with Czech Republic. We got separated in '93, and another milestone was in 1989. There was a Velvet Revolution, and we threw down the bad regime, like the communist regime. Now, times in the 80s, because in the 80s our story begins, times were pretty tough. People were afraid to talk. You were like forbidden to wear jeans to the school, or for me example, I was forbidden to have a long hair. And if you saw a line in front of the store, it wasn't for a new iPhone or anything. It was like probably for bananas, for meat, or some new shoes. So it was like that kind of time. Now imagine that you are a developer in those times in the 80s, in the start of the 80s. You don't have a knowledge, you don't have any roots and any tools, and most importantly, you don't have a computer because you can't afford one. And even if you had like resources, there wasn't a store where you can walk in and buy one. So it was pretty tough to be a developer in the early 80s. Now it is very important to say that every developer has its own story from the former Czechoslovakia. I will focus on my side of things because I'm that old, because I lived in the 80s. Yeah. So let's start with the hardware. I told you about that there wasn't any hardware, but in Slovakia there were a couple of manufacturers that they made hardware. Now, meet the infamous PMD-85. PMD-85 was produced by a company called Tesla. Now, it's not the car manufacturer, it's a different kind of Tesla. I hope that you caught the groundbreaking hardware configurations and the groundbreaking resolution with 4 colors supported. Now, PMD was so expensive, it was found only in schools and in big companies. But it was pretty easy to program on it because it used basic language. And so it was pretty to program, but it was too expensive. Now, let's move on to another computer. It's called Matthew, or Maťo in Slovak. Now, this is a cheaper version of the PMD because, like I said, the PMD was too expensive. Now, the Matthew or Maťo had two major flaws. Now, the first one was it wasn't 100% compatible with the PMD. And the second one, the computer was sold in self-assembly kit. Now, you got a box, you got all the components in it, so you had to put it together and then have fun. So it was pretty common in 80s to buy something that you need to put together, or you only bought blueprints, and all the rest was up to you how you deal with it. Now, yeah, let's move on now. This is very important. Meet the wet dream of every developer in former Czechoslovakia. Now, this is the ZX Spectrum made in Slovakia. It's called Didactic Gamma. It was released in '87. It was nearly impossible to buy, as I heard. But it started a new era. Now, this era is called text-based era. I hope that you can see it. Our heritage lies in 8-bit microcomputers. Now, since everybody was learning by the popular technique trial and error, games in the 80s didn't use graphics. Now, it was pretty easy to write a couple of lines of text and then release a game. It was done in 2 weeks. And that's why during the 80s and the early 90s, over 100 text-based adventures was produced. Now, some of them are pretty classics. I won't be talking about those, but there is the first for everything. This game is called City of Robots, or Miesto Robotu. It was released in '89. It was probably the first multi-platform text adventure game. Now, what's special about this game is that Miesto Robotu was supported by by a campaign in national TV. It was really terrible, but this is a different kind of story. What's important is that this is the first commercially available game in former Czechoslovakia. It costs 99 crowns. It's like €4, but back in those days, it's I don't know, 1/6 of salary. Yeah, that's it. So it was pretty expensive. Yes, this is the first one. I think you can download it somewhere on some obscure websites and play it, but that's not important right now. So this was the first one, and like I said, the Didactic Gamma started the revolution of text-based era. Now, there was a different kind of computer. It was released after the Velvet Revolution. It was pretty calm in those times, and it was pretty affordable. As I can remember, Didactic M was in every household. It was pretty easy to copy games on cassettes. The piracy was, I would say, non-existent, because nobody knew about copyrights, nobody knew about licenses, nobody knew about how to handle games. And of course, there wasn't a chain where you can buy games. So it was pretty easy to, hey, give me a new game. Okay, here it is. Here's a full cassette. Didactic M was pretty much in every household, but there was cheaper alternatives to it, like the Commodore 64 and Atari 130XE, and of course, from the West, because the borders were open at that time, you can buy pretty easy Amigas or Atari STs. And of course, there was a PC wave coming, horrible PC wave. So let's move on. Now, this is another important title. Yeah, it's Tetris 2. It wasn't licensed, so yeah, from Czechoslovakia comes the ultimate version of Soviet computer game. It was released by by a guy called František Fuka. Now this guy made a couple of really important text-based adventures. He's considered like the first indie developer in former Czechoslovakia. What's special about this title is that it was released also abroad, and it was quite popular because in Tetris 2, as the name implies, you could play Tetris on one screen, two players simultaneously. Now let's move on to year 1994, where these games were released. Now, bear in mind that in 1995, PlayStation First was released. Now we are in 1994, we are still in 8-bit era. But this is really important title. It was one of the popular in the portfolio of company called Ultrasoft. Ultrasoft was the first publisher, distributor, and maker of video games here in Slovakia. They even imported games from UK. They repackaged it and they sold it for platforms that were available like ZX Spectrum, Commodore 64, and so on. Now these are a couple of covers from those days. These are the covers from cassettes box. Yeah. So you open it and they were like cassette tape. I don't know if you remember what the cassette tape looked like. I don't have a picture. Sorry for that. Now the Ultrasoft was really special because they even published a magazine. It was called Bit. It ran for 4 years, but unfortunately I think it was like the hand of God that made the magazine disappear because it wasn't like too professional. I have a couple of issues with me, so you can like see what magazine looked like in 1994. It's pretty bad, but you should definitely check it out. But if you are interested in 8-bit magazines, you can download fully scanned issues on oldgames.sk. There are even more magazines from that time. But let's move on to the modern times. Now, we are looking at a picture from really old classic Slovakia. It was, some says that this is the first game published in Slovakia. It's called Quadrax. It was released in 1996 for PC. Now this screenshot is for PC version, but the first version for ZX Spectrum was released in 95. The full version is available at cauldron.sk, and if you own an iOS device, you can download it under the name Puzzle Expedition for, I think, €2 or something like that. Now, bear in mind that this is really a hardcore puzzle game with really hardcore following, since fans made sequels and made hundreds and hundreds of levels after the release. So, yeah, and it was made by the longest running studio here in Slovakia called Cauldron. We have one founder here. He's our camera guy over there. He's pretty old and wise and wise. Yeah, give it up for him. Speaking about Cauldron, Cauldron was really important in Slovakian history since they made real-time strategy game called Spellcross. Now, as you know that in every real-time strategy there are two forces fighting each other. It was turn-based, yeah, sorry, yeah. But in this game there was like forces of evil versus modern warfare, so it was like really cool. Now, what's important about this title is that it was the first Slovak-made video game published in the West by the Western publisher, and it also got cult following, since fans even today are demanding sequels. So where is it? Nobody knew. Now let's move on. Speaking about cult, this is a 2D isometric RPG made by a couple of guys from the eastern part of Slovakia called 3D People. Nowadays they are known as Games Farm. Now this title is also important from one point. It was made in cooperation with International Hobo. Now it's a company founded by Chris Bateman. Chris Bateman is designer, game study freak, and writer. He wrote the whole story, he wrote the whole game design, and of course he brought on board Tom Baker, the famous UK writer, who narrated the game. So yeah, he was one of the first? No, it wasn't like one of the first, but it was really professional done. Yeah, and you can download it on GOG, not for free, but for some couple of bucks. Yeah. So let's move on. Now, does anybody know which game is depicted on the screenshot? No one. Okay, so I'll tell you. This game was made by a studio in Bratislava. The studio is called Silverwish Games. The Silverwish game was part of Illusion Softworks. No one knows. Okay. So it's called Chameleon. Yeah, it was third-person stealth action game. Unfortunately for the team and for the game, it was finished in 2003, but it was published 2 years later by Take-Two, but only in a couple of European countries. So it was pretty cool game, but unfortunately for the team and the game, nobody knows that this game was made in Slovakia and that even exists. So but I own a copy, so I'm pretty lucky. Now let's move on to a really tragic story in Slovakian history. I know a couple of smiley faces, so they already know what's going to happen next. You are seeing a picture from a game that was supposed to be the most ambitious game, and it was probably the most ambitious game developed here in Slovakia. It was powered by Unreal, and it's supposed to be the first game for Xbox 360 and PS3 developed here. It's called Alveon, or Book of Elves. The developer is Tentacle Slovakia, the part of Tentacle Studios from Germany. Now, as you may know, the Tentacle studio in Germany pretty aggressively bought a couple of studios around the world, and they filed for bankruptcy after that. So it was pretty much done. The Alveon was never finished, even by the fact that 2 studios was brought on board to finish the game, but nobody knows what happened to it. I know a couple of guys worked on it, but like NDAs and so on. So yeah, Alveon was pretty tragic. And I know that you were visiting Pixel Federation today. So yeah, this is the most successful game, commercially wise, released from Slovakia. I don't know if the numbers are correct, but it still attracts like hundreds of thousands daily users, and the monthly revenue is pretty high, even today. And the game was released in 2010. And the next step for TrainStation is Invade mobile platform, so you can play it in browser on Facebook, but you will play it on mobile soon, I hope. Now let's move on to a different title, to a more recent history. Now, this is a title called Shadows Heretic Kingdoms. It was released in November 2014, a couple of months ago. It was made by guys who made a Cult. You saw the title previews. Unfortunately for them, after publishing the game, the publisher went bankrupt. Yeah, that's it. Like the Slovak studio has like really lucky German publishers. But nowadays they are fighting for distribution rights, and they are making a sequel. So I hope that they will release it soon, because it's supposed to be released this month, I think. So now let's move on to different title. Now I already told you about the studio, the longest running studio here in Slovakia, called Cauldron. Now this is the last title, because the Cauldron was shut down after 18 years. It's called Big Game Hunter Pro Hunts. Cauldron was specialty of Cauldron was making hunting games for US markets. Now Big Game Hunter and another series called Dangerous Hunts were million sellers over there. You can buy those games, of course, in Europe, but we are not that crazy hunting animals. So Yeah, you can buy it on pretty much on every platform available right now, even on PCs. Now, there is a happy ending to every story. Now, you probably know about this title, right? It's called DayZ. It's a million seller. It's an American dream for every developer. Now, after the Cauldron was shut down, they were approached by a company called Bohemia Interactive, and Bohemia Interactive bought the studio, and nowadays they are finishing the standalone version. So if you go to a shop in next year, and you will see boxes of DayZ. Now the DayZ was made in Slovakia. Of course, the PC version is being made in Czech Republic, but the console version are made here, I think. So now there was only a fraction of titles, of course, developed in Slovakia. There were a couple of dozens more that we can talk about. The time is an essence here, and I know that you are waiting for those numbers. Of course, there are studios who make mobile games, hardcore games, mid-core games, sports managers, and there are companies that helps with analytics, and they offer technical support for or solutions to other companies like Frontier or Rare in the UK. But let's talk numbers. So this is the Slovak game development scene right now. We have 32 active studios. Half of those are registered here in Bratislava. 40% of the whole are employing at least 4 people. Number of projects in development is around 35. Now bear in mind that not all of those projects will be released this year. Of course, there are like long-term goals and long-term projects. And a couple of other statistics. Longest running studio is Cauldron, as I mentioned. They been in business for 18 years. Nowadays they are called Bohemia Interactive Bratislava. And the biggest studio is Pixel Federation. I think the number is not correct. It's 150, yeah. So thanks for correcting me on that. I hope that you have now better picture about Slovak development scene, and that now you know a couple of great titles that were developed here. Now, speaking about studios and the scene, we have a new initiative called GameDevHub. Now, we are helping to build awareness not only for the region but also for the studios here, and we are helping them to connect them by organizing events like this. So if you want to know more about what's going to happen and what's going on in Slovak development scene, subscribe at the GameDevHub.org to find out what's happening. And I think that's it for me. So thank you, ďakujem, danke. And if you have questions, I'll be here for the whole evening. I think another speaker is eagerly to do his presentation. So once again, thank you very much for your attention.